So some of the biggest themes in CTV right now, I think, roll up into transparency, or I should say perhaps lack thereof. And so, that's a consistent theme not only for programmatic, but for CTV most especially. Marketers today want to be able to plan, activate, and optimize at a content level, especially in CTV. In CTV, what that means is getting down to things like genre, title, season, rating, understanding where and how an impression is being delivered. The problem today, though, is that 2/3 of marketers cite a lack of transparency in CTV. So it's a big problem and focus point for the industry and for OpenX as well. And I think we'll take a collective effort to get around as we head into 2025.
So in that chain, let's say between the advertiser and the publisher and everything that goes on, what's happening there to cause this lack of transparency? Are there any like key or weakest links in there? Or?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. So first and foremost, data standardization or lack thereof. What I mean by that is, in CTV, there needs to be a consistent, identifiable, standardized way of communicating and translating CTV signals across the programmatic space. And a good example is a lot of inaccuracies that exist. And so what I mean by that is if you look at something like romantic comedy for a genre, it seems pretty simple. There's so many variations of that, right? There's rom-com, one word. There's rom-com, two words. There's romantic comedy, one word. There's romantic comedy, two words. There's dashes in the middle. So there's a lot of variations that can exist just within one specific type of signal that makes it very difficult to buyers to understand what they're actually reading and what they're actually getting access to in a CTV impression. And so generally it's a mismatch between what the publisher is sending and what a DSP is recognizing or able to ingest into their system.
So how are we going to solve for this? Is it going to be something that, a professional association or somebody else that's going to help set standards, or what do you see happening?
Yeah, so something we've done at OpenX that we're really excited about is normalizing those signals, right? So taking what is the wild, wild west of content signals today and distilling them down into a standardized, consistent, uniform taxonomy that publishers can plug into and buyers can activate easily on. To give some numbers behind that, right? When we look at CTV signals today, we see over 4,000 signals out there in the ecosystem. Now that number gets incredibly high and into sometimes the millions, depending on the variations that you're considering and factoring in that number. What we've done at OpenX is distill that number down to 117 standardized, uniform content signal and content signal definitions so that publishers can plug into that and buyers can have access to that in a very easily readable way and digestible way. The last thing I'll say here is the results of that have been pretty incredible, right? So when we look at the performance of content object targeted deals, we see a 7x increase in bid rate compared to non-content object targeted deals and a 11% increase in CPM when something like the genre signal is included in the bid stream. So what that tells us is that buyers are getting a lot of great value from these signals being communicated in a normalized and standardized way.
Yeah, actually, could you tell us a little bit more about those 117 categories, just what they are? Just you don't have to tell me what all of them are, but I'm just kind of curious how they're organized.
Yeah, so they're organized in kind of a tiered approach. So you have things like genre, title, rating, season, right, in kind of tier one, and then you have variations of that progress throughout the kind of the taxonomy and hierarchy of it that go down to disparate levels of granularity depending on what the buyer is looking for and what the buyer desires for their campaigns and their transactions.
Now, let's see, you work closely with demand-side platforms, and how are they thinking about content object signals?
Yeah, it's funny. It kind of ranges. There's kind of two corners of the market, right? There's corner one of demand-side platforms who really aren't using content signals in any material way. The other corner is using them, which is good news, but is using them in kind of varying degrees. And so what I mean by that is some are doing targeting, some are doing reporting, and some are doing both. But what is really exciting is that as I talk to and engage those DSP platforms, when I talk to them about normalized signals in a standardized taxonomy, both of those groups get really excited. The first group gets excited because it lowers a barrier to entry into leveraging those content signals for their buyers. And the second group, it augments what they're already doing, right? And makes it more reliable, more consistent, more transactable in the various use cases that buyers are leveraging content signals within their platforms.
Now, looking ahead the next 6 months to a year, is there anything we should be aware of that's going on in connected television?
Yeah, I think there's going to be an increased focus as we enter 2025 into transparency. I think, we, especially us OpenX, have a lot of experience as an industry in display and mobile app, and we've kind of come the full journey in growing the transparency and adopting transparency in those channels. CTV is somewhat at a crossroads, right, where we're just exploring what transparency looks like in CTV. And the thing is, it can happen in a range of different ways, right? So we've done things like cutting out resellers, right, and reducing multi-hop resold traffic for buyers in the CTV space. We've also reclassified CTV so that when a buyer selects CTV, right, and activating through OpenX, they're getting glass on wall, lean back style entertainment type of content that any buyer who's selecting CTV is intending to buy. And then thirdly is content signals, right? Getting better uniformity and standardization around content signals in the space and the ability for buyers to transact and understand where and how their impressions are being delivered across the CTV programmatic landscape.